I am Kiki Prottsman, and I am in elementary computer science education. And I've been in that field since before elementary computer science education was a field. In 2011, I created a nonprofit called Thinkersmith that brought computer science concepts to children of very young ages through arts and crafts and games, and eventually through online platforms as well. And in 2015, Code.org absorbed our nonprofit. They are a very large nonprofit, and I went to work for them for several years. And now I have left Code.org, and I spend my time writing educational children's books, doing YouTube videos, and consulting on other innovative digital curriculum. So, there we go. I'm going to ask you to humor me for a minute, and I would like to have you close your eyes while I lead you on a digital imagination journey. Go ahead, close your eyes. I won't steal your purse. There's a camera on me. Okay, good. Now imagine that you're in a world where you don't learn mathematics in elementary school. You don't learn math in middle school, and you probably don't even learn math in high school. In fact, the first time you're officially exposed to mathematics is when it's required your first term of university. And then you have to learn arithmetic, algebra, and calculus all in that first 10 weeks. How do you think you would feel about math? How would you feel about your aptitude for math? Okay, open your eyes. It's probably not too far of a stretch to understand that what I was talking about is how most of the world currently approaches computer science. And that's kind of why we're in this bind that we're in right now, which is very few self-selecting people believe that they're good at computer science and go on to do larger things with it, whether they're in the industry or not. So maybe you're with me and you're like, okay, yeah, I see. If you want to be in computer science, then it is very difficult to learn it just going straight into college. But why? Why would we want the general population to learn computer science? And I would respond with, well, at least in America, it is one of the fastest growing job industries that we have. There are so many jobs in computer science that it's hard to find qualified applicants. In fact, for every other kind of job in America, there are about 30 applicants per job opening. And in computer science, there are about 3 job openings for every qualified applicant. So you can see that that's quite a big difference. Beyond that, even if you don't want to go into computer science, if you're interested in any STEM career, science, technology, engineering, math, about 3/4 of all of those require you to know some computer science in order to get those jobs. And the jobs pay pretty well. The pay is fantastic. Now, globally, it's an opportunity that translates across industry. So really, as today's school children grow up, it doesn't matter what industry they go into, whether they go into automotive, into healthcare, into music. Having those computer science skills is going to help them be better at their craft. Computer science also drives innovation. In fact, if you think about all of the things that we want to try to do faster, more cheaply, and more efficiently, many times there is a computer or some sort of computer science at the bottom of that innovation. Not to mention that sometimes things just aren't possible without the modeling of a computer. We were talking about things like landing on Mars. It's very expensive to try and land on Mars. You don't want your first attempt to be the real thing. You need to have a model. You need to see all of the things that can go wrong. And being able to use computer science to adapt those things is very, very helpful. All right, maybe you're with me so far, and you say, okay, so computer science is important. But why isn't high school enough, or why isn't middle school enough? And this is really where we get to it. It's that computer science, programming specifically, it's a language. And you've probably heard that children are generally better at learning languages than adults. It doesn't necessarily mean that they learn them faster. If you take an adult and a child and try and get them fluent in a language, they might learn them at the same time. But a child learns these languages in the motor center of their brain, the part that's responsible for their muscle memory, the things that come out intuitively, rather than having to work at converting it and work at keeping that at the tip of their tongue. And adults don't have that capability, in large part because around the age of 7 to 11, those synapses in that area of the brain start to clean themselves out. If they didn't, then people would be so overstimulated all the time they couldn't function whatsoever. So instead, that center starts to break down, and they're left with those core skills as things that they can do as part of muscle memory. If any of you have learned songs or dances when you're children, you probably find that years later, decades later, you can still recall those songs and dances just very intuitively. Now, working for Thinkersmith, one of the biggest complaints we got was that our curriculum felt watered down, that it wasn't rigorous enough. Because we all know we want computer scientists when they're 6 years old to be developing stuff for NASA. There are a few. But in general, you think of a 6-year-old, they're still at this age where if you offer them 2/4 of a graham cracker or an entire graham cracker, they'll choose the 2/4 because 2 is more than 1. Or if you take a short, fat glass of water, and in front of their eyes, you pour that into a tall, thin glass of water, and you ask them which one has more, what will they say? The tall, thin glass of water, because it's bigger. These types of cognitive limitations start to go away after several years, but they are definitely still present in young children, and we can't expect them to be able to fashion the same type of logic on large scale that an adult might. So we increase these things with their cognitive ability, the same way you do in math. You don't expect a 6-year-old to be solving quadratic equations. You start with arithmetic and you build up from there. And finally, better foundations mean that these students are better prepared for their advanced education. If you're a student, if you're very, very young, you start to believe that you are and are not capable of things. And in fact, by the time you reach 3rd grade, you already have set in your mind a list of things you probably can be and things that you probably can't be or are not good at. And it's very hard to change your mind after that point. So if you've been exposed to computer science before that time, you're much more likely to withstand all of the pain points that come along with the failure of computer science later in life. Now, there's other research that also shows that once a child is exposed to computer science, their ability to learn increases across subjects. So they do better in math, they do better in reading once they've learned computer science and the skills that teach you how to learn. And why wouldn't you want them benefiting from that from as young of an age as possible? Okay. So maybe we're all on board with the need to learn computer science, and we're all on board with the need to learn it young. Why add robotics to the mix? If we've already talked about these cognitive limitations, and we've talked about the fact that it is difficult for kids sometimes to get started in something very rigorous, why would you add the extra complication and the extra expense of a robot? That's a trick question, because it's not an extra complication, really. In fact, in many ways, using robotics simplifies computer science education. So if you look at some of the programs that kids are using nowadays, you have block-based coding puzzles that are projected on a screen, and the students are looking at this entity that they want to get from point A to point B, and that entity is looking back at them, which means if I need to go forward and then turn left and move forward, to the student, that's moving forward, turning right and moving forward. So it's directly opposite of what the student would be doing. Whereas when you have a robot, you can bring it to where you are. You can have that robot on the floor, share its point of view, and as a student, I can say, I want to go from here to there, and these are the steps I would take to get there, and therefore those are the steps that I need to present to my robot to get there. It's very empathetic. The student who, before the age of 8, students are very limited in their ability to empathize for a situation from someone other than their own, including even their own stuffed animal or a puppy or anything of that nature. They're projecting their own feelings. So having something that's a little bit more theirs, something that they can interact with a little bit more, makes everything feel a little more real and a little bit more natural. Not only that, but debugging is easier because the student can actually step through the process themselves and get to where they need to be so they can see what's going wrong. And then you have this idea that they are adaptable in that if a puzzle has been programmed on the screen, it has its starting place and it has its ending place, and the student needs to figure out where to go. When you're playing with a robot, you're in your environment. If I wanted to move from here to there, that's exactly the same as having it move from here to there, but it's in my world now. It's in my terms. And they're tactile. There's something you can hold, you can look at, you can decorate. And if you look at the crafty robots that we saw before, they are something you can personalize and you really feel connected to. And so you're building, you're making, you're using your hands, you're using the manipulation instead of just pure screen time. So, why am I bringing this up here and why am I telling this to you? Many of you are in a position where even if you don't work for a robotics company or a company that invests in robotics, you might work for an organization that understands how important technology is to everyday life. And if that's you, then I'm asking you to please look around, figure out what you can invest in. What can you help along? Are there programs at your local schools? Are there after-school clubs that you can help bring this to? Is there something you can give funding to, either in the way of spreading this educationally or in developing it? If you are an investor in a robotics company or you build robots, then you can do some research and development on what makes a good robot for education. What takes some of the worry out of the teacher's hands? What inspires a young child? Coming up with those ideas and making it accessible is really the next step to making it ubiquitous. And then finally, developing and building those prototypes, getting teacher input, making the education part the important part, and the affordability, making sure that that's there. Because bringing more computer science education to the population that can already reach it is not going to do as much for the world as bringing the same technology to students who wouldn't have it otherwise. Because I believe that every student deserves a chance to learn computer science. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Well, here we go, down the front. We'll just we'll get a microphone to you very quickly. Very nice talk, something after my heart. I have a background in computer science, so I think it's very important.
Thank you.
What you're doing.
A very good question. At what age can you start giving that sort of training using robotics to young kids?
For the most part, that's up to the parent. There are a lot of different belief systems as to when a child should begin using screen time versus learning different things like that. There are products now that go all the way down to kindergarten and pre-K. You don't need to read in order to begin robotics or computer science in general. But if you feel like it's detrimental to your child in order to have them sitting in front of a screen or doing these rigorous assignments at a younger age, then there's really no harm in waiting until a little bit later and introducing it in bite-sized chunks as they grow up, rather than diving right in as soon as they're born.
Okay, very good. So it is down to individual parents and how they view. But it's very interesting that your ideas can fit into different philosophies of parenting. Maybe some want to let their child grow and different, have some idea that just by exploring can learning as well. Other parents want to really get their kids to work.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is that idea also that even if it's screen time, the development that they're getting with their brain and the logic outweighs what they would be getting by using a screen.
Sure. Anyone else before we move on? Oh, yeah, at the back there. Sorry, yep, go ahead.
So I fully agree. The one question I get from actual friends in technology companies and who've done computer science and having children now is, should they even bother teaching their kids, because in 30 years, will it be the key skill? And so some of my friends are like, they don't think it's the right thing. So how do you respond to that? Because I haven't got a good response.
Yeah, no, I actually love this question. I was speaking...
What kind of insane crap is that? Like, why not? Let's not teach them nothing today because it's going to change tomorrow. What? Anyway, go ahead. Sorry, with a more sensible answer than mine.
You do actually start to get into that issue when you teach them one thing, and you only teach them that one thing for 10 to 15 years. But an amazing thing happens when you then teach them a second and different thing, and even better, a third and different thing. You're teaching them transfer of knowledge. And so what happens is, if you learn JavaScript and only JavaScript your entire life, you know JavaScript. If you've learned JavaScript and then you go on to Ruby and then you go on to C# and then you go on to a bunch of these other programming languages, you know how to program. Because in your brain, you figured out what are the similarities, how do I structure that program so that I can do it really anywhere, and you feel adaptable. Sure, you've had to go through that failure of learning something new many, many times, but that also makes you more resilient, as any entrepreneur in here should know. So my advice would be, if your intention is to teach them one thing and have them do that thing for 30 years, maybe if they started 30 years ago, that would still be okay, but it's not okay today. Start with something, and if they like it, and only if they like it, encourage them to try something else and something else and something else until eventually they've built their own perception of their efficacy.
Very good.
Great question.
Nice one. Okay, very good. Round of applause for Kiki. Thank you.
Thank you very much.